The first knock didn't sound alarming. It was soft, barely more than a thud, yet it dragged me out of the edge of sleep the way a sudden drop yanks someone awake on an airplane. My duplex was freezing, the kind of dry winter cold that cracked skin and made every breath feel too sharp. I blinked up at the ceiling, momentarily disoriented from my 12-hour ER shift and the fatigue still dragging at my muscles. The heating unit had shut off hours ago, probably tripped by the storm the news anchors had been ranting about all evening. The temperature outside had plunged into the low 20s, with gusts of wind screaming against the siding hard enough to rattle the windows in their frames. Inside wasn't much warmer. My breath fogged the air as I sat up. Then came 3 deliberate knocks, slow, measured, too purposeful to be an accident. Something inside me went still. Nobody knocks at 4:30 in the morning with good intentions. I shoved the blankets aside and hissed at the shock of cold air slapping my skin. The wooden floorboards were icy beneath my bare feet as I reached for my phone on the nightstand. 4:32 a.m. The numbers glared in bright white. The knocking came again, this time harder. I switched on the porch light before cracking the door open, and froze. Dean stood on my doorstep, my 11-year-old nephew, his thin frame bowed under the weight of his little sister slumped over his back. Hannah's arms hung around his neck like loose rope. Her head lolled sideways. She wasn't conscious. Dean's lips were blue. His skin had gone nearly chalk white, and his pajama pants were soaked to the knee with melted snow. An old garage rug, filthy and stiff with grease stains, was draped around his shoulders like a makeshift cloak. His sneakers were drenched, and his toes, bare beneath the fabric, were dangerously pale. Hannah was worse. My medical brain activated instantly. Her lips were blue-gray. Her chest lifted in quick, shallow gasps, each breath producing a tight, raspy stridor that sent panic slicing up my spine. She wore only a thin pink nightgown, the kind with cartoon princesses on the front, fabric meant for warm bedrooms, not winter storms. Dean had wrapped his own heavy coat around her tiny body. He protected her with everything he had. "Inside," he croaked. "Come in," I said, though my voice had already transformed into something steady and clinical. I slid Hannah off his back, horrified at how limp she was in my arms. Dean collapsed the second the weight left him, legs buckling as if cut from beneath him. I scooped Hannah toward the couch, grabbed every blanket within reach, and began the hypothermia protocol I'd repeated hundreds of times in the ER. Warm the core. Don't shock the extremities. Monitor breathing. Prevent cardiac complications. Her breaths were worsening. Her airway was tightening. I sprinted to the bathroom, grabbed my personal nebulizer, the one I kept in emergencies, and assembled it with shaking hands. Saline mist filled the mask as I placed it over her face, praying for even the slightest improvement. Dean's teeth chattered violently as he lay trembling near the door. My fingers dialed 911. "This is Nurse Willowhart," I said, voice flat and professional. "License RN 4022. I have 2 pediatric emergencies. Severe neglect suspected. I need police and EMS immediately." As the sirens grew closer through the storm, I glanced at Dean, his eyes hollow, too old for 11. This night wasn't an accident. It was a beginning. But I had no idea that saving them tonight would thrust all 3 of us into a battle far greater and far darker than I ever expected. The ambulance's interior smelled faintly of antiseptic and metal, illuminated by harsh LED lights that made everything appear sharper and more urgent. Hannah lay strapped to the gurney, her oxygen mask fogging as she drew in ragged breaths. The EMT hovered over her, checking vitals, adjusting flow rates, murmuring soft encouragements she couldn't hear. I sat beside Dean on the bench seat, holding a cup of warm chocolate milk to his lips. His hands were too stiff to grasp it himself, so I guided the straw to his mouth. He took small sips, each swallow followed by a wince, his throat protesting the sudden warmth. His body still trembled beneath the thermal blankets. "Dean," I said gently, "can you tell me what happened?" For a moment, he didn't respond. His eyes stayed fixed on the ceiling, watching the strip lights blur past as though they were stars streaking across a frozen sky. His jaw worked. His lips parted. "They left." "Who left?" I asked. "Mom and Dad. They left at 5. Said they were going to a party. A casino opening." They told us to order pizza and go to bed at 9. The EMT's hands paused, a split-second break, but resumed quickly. I kept my voice level. Did you eat dinner? Dean shook his head. I made us sandwiches earlier. But Hannah was still hungry. He swallowed hard, voice thinning. At 10 we heard the wind. Hannah said the house felt cold inside. I got up to check the backyard. I put on my coat. She stayed in the living room. A sigh shuddered through him. The wind caught the door. It slammed. The smart lock engaged. It wouldn't open. My stomach tightened. Did you try the code? I did. He brushed a hand over his face, ashamed. It didn't work. I tried again. And again. I called Dad. Then Mom. But the phone was dying. And then it was dead. He swallowed again. Hannah came outside looking for me. She didn't know how cold it was. She was wheezing. She kept saying her chest hurt. His voice cracked. I wrapped her in my coat. But the garage wasn't warm. It kept getting colder. I thought she might. I squeezed his hand gently. You did everything right. He blinked hard, tears threatening, but he didn't let them fall. When she couldn't breathe, I knew we couldn't stay. So I picked her up and walked. Through the forest. Shortcut to your house. It was really cold. But I kept walking. My chest tightened. Dean had walked a mile through a storm, carrying his sister, without shoes or proper clothing. You saved her life, Dean, I said, voice thick. He turned toward me, eyes hollow. No. I just didn't want her to die alone. The sirens grew louder as we turned into the hospital bay. Nurses rushed forward. Doors swung open. This wasn't just neglect. This was a pattern. And someone had to stop it. I thought the hospital would be the end of a nightmare, but the next person who walked in made it clear this was only the beginning. By 8 a.m., the ER buzzed with the familiar chaos of shift change. Monitors chimed. Nurses exchanged reports. Cartwheels squeaked against linoleum. But the calm I usually felt in this environment had been replaced by a rising sense of dread. I'd barely slept since the children arrived. Dean was resting, feet elevated, wrapped in sterile dressings. Hannah had been transferred to the pediatric ICU, her breathing steadier but still frighteningly fragile. Every time I checked on her, I felt both relief and fury. Then I heard it, the sharp, clipped sound of heels approaching. I turned. A woman in her 50s entered the hallway, wearing a charcoal blazer pressed so neatly it could have sliced the air. Thin glasses perched on her nose. Her posture was precise, rigid, professional. Miss Hart, she asked. Yes. She didn't shake my hand. I'm Carla Evans, Child Protective Services. Dean shifted in his wheelchair, shrinking under her gaze. Carla entered the room and began surveying everything. The 4 lines, Dean's bandages, Hannah's chart, scribbling notes at lightning speed. Her expression remained unreadable. I need to evaluate the children's immediate safety, she said. They are currently under emergency protective custody. I nodded, though the words hit like ice water. Carla continued, given your position as their aunt, kinship placement is possible. But there are strict requirements. Before they can stay with you, I must inspect your residence. Of course. She didn't soften. The inspection will be tomorrow morning. If your home does not meet safety standards, including sleeping arrangements, security, hygiene, and emergency readiness, the children will be placed into foster care. Cold dread pooled in my stomach. My duplex was clean enough for one person, but not child-ready. I had no children's beds, no locks on cleaning cabinets, no car seats, nothing resembling a stable home for 2 traumatized kids. But I couldn't let her see my panic. Understood, I said. Carla made another note. Please remember, standards are non-negotiable. Then she turned and left with the same measured precision she walked in with. Dean stared at me wide-eyed. Are they taking us away? He whispered. No, I said, kneeling to meet his eye level. They're not. You promise. I held his gaze, not as a nurse, not as a sister, but as someone who refused to let him be abandoned again. I promise, I said. But inside, I was already taking inventory, beds, clothes, food, safety gates, medications, supplies. The cost was staggering. My savings weren't enough. Nothing I owned felt liquid enough. Except my grandmother's necklace, my laptop, my espresso machine. I swallowed. I had less than 24 hours to transform a single person's apartment into a home for 2 neglected children. Sirens wailed outside as another ambulance arrived. This wasn't the end. It wasn't even close. And just when I began planning how to save these kids, the last 2 people I expected to show up stormed into the ER, my brother and his wife. The automatic doors slid open with cold, sterile indifference, letting in a gust of winter air and 2 people I'd hoped wouldn't appear until much later, if at all. My brother, Joshua, strode into the ER lobby first. He was still wearing last night's suit, though the fabric was wrinkled, the tie pulled loose, and his eyes bloodshot. The Rolex on his wrist gleamed obscenely under fluorescent lights, as though mocking the children he'd abandoned. Jane stumbled behind him. Her evening gown was stained at the hem, mascara streaked down her cheeks, perfume mixing unpleasantly with the sour scent of alcohol. Anyone else would have been embarrassed walking into a hospital like this. Not Jane. She performed distress like she'd rehearsed it. "Where are my babies?" she cried dramatically, rushing the nurse's station. Security stepped forward. "Ma'am, you need to calm. I am their mother." Joshua spotted me near the hallway. His expression flickered, panic calculation, then a smooth, polished smile he used whenever he wanted something. He approached with hands raised as if he were the victim here. "Willow," he said softly, "thank God you were there. This whole thing, it's blown out of proportion." I didn't move. He lowered his voice. "Look, I made a mistake. But you know how cold it gets. Doors freeze, locks malfunction. It didn't malfunction. I cut in. You sealed them out." His face twitched. Then the mask returned. "You're struggling with money, right? Nursing school debt. Let me help." He leaned closer. "I'll wipe all your loans. Today. Just tell CPS this was a misunderstanding." My stomach turned. "No," I said. His voice hardened. "You're making a mistake. The only mistake was trusting you with children." Before I could step away, Joshua grabbed my arm hard. "Enough to bruise. Listen to me," he hissed. "I will bury you. I'll take your license. I'll—" "Don't touch her." The voice was small but fierce. "Dean." He stood, gripping the sides of his wheelchair despite the pain, despite the fresh bandages, despite everything he'd been through. His eyes were burning. "Don't you ever touch her," he shouted. You left us. You left us to die." The lobby fell silent. Jane froze. Color drained from her face. Security rushed forward. "Step back," one ordered. But Joshua kept talking, desperation cracking through his fake composure. "This is a family matter. She's twisting things. Officer Jasper arrived at precisely the wrong moment for Joshua and the perfect one for justice. "Sir," Jasper said, tone flat, "turn around and put your hands behind your back." Joshua blinked. "What?" "Officer, be reasonable. Now." Handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Jane screamed, "This is insane. We came here worried about our children." Another officer stepped beside her. "Jane Hart, you are under arrest for child endangerment and bail violation." As the officers led them out, Joshua twisted to glare at me. "You'll regret this," he spat. But Dean looked at me with something new, something fragile and hopeful. "Are we safe?" he whispered. I knelt and brushed a hand through his hair. "Yes," I said. "You're safe now." For the first time, he believed me. But safety wasn't guaranteed yet, because CPS still had to decide whether my home was good enough to keep them out of foster care. Carla Evans gave me exactly 20 hours to transform my tiny duplex into a child-appropriate, regulation-perfect safe haven. 20 hours that stood between my niece and nephew and the foster system. I'd fought too hard for them to lose them now. The problem was simple. Nothing I owned was kid-ready. No beds. No security locks. No booster seats. No winter clothes in their sizes. No inhaler spacers or pediatric medicine organizers. I didn't even own a night light. My bank account held $7,500, most of which I'd been saving for emergencies. But this wasn't an emergency. It was a rescue mission. By noon, I began selling everything of value I owned. First, my grandmother's diamond necklace, a family heirloom, the last thing she'd ever given me. The pawn shop paid $3,800 in cash. Selling it hurt, but not more than seeing frostbite on Dean's feet. Second, my laptop, freshly paid off after 2 years of monthly installments. I posted it online and sold it within hours for $900. Third, my espresso machine. Italian-made, stainless steel, my one luxury. Selling it felt like losing a piece of myself. But children mattered more than cappuccinos. By evening, I'd gathered $12,800. Enough to buy beds, bedding, clothing, medications, a humidifier for Hannah's lungs, storage bins, safety latches, a dresser, a fire extinguisher, and anything else Carla's clipboard might demand. I spent the entire night assembling furniture, tightening screws, blistering my hands on Allen wrenches. I built 2 bunk beds, installed cabinet locks, scrubbed the floors, washed new sheets, arranged toys I'd bought, and stocked the fridge with food children actually needed. By sunrise, my apartment looked nothing like the place I'd lived in for years. It looked like a home. And just in time. At 9 a.m., Carla arrived. She inspected everything. The beds, the smoke detectors, the pantry, the medication storage, my emergency plan printed and posted by the door. She checked water temperature, window locks, the first aid kit, even the spacing between railings on the bunk beds. Finally, she turned to me, expression unreadable. "You've made significant improvements," she said. My chest tightened. Then she signed her clipboard with a final flourish. "You may pick up the children tomorrow." Relief crashed over me, so forcefully my knees nearly buckled. Carla nodded once, still serious, still precise, but softer now. "They're fortunate to have you." When she left, I stood alone in the quiet house, surrounded by the echoes of what I'd just built. Not perfection, but safety. And that was enough. But while I prepared for their arrival, someone else was preparing to threaten everything I just fought for, and she had a massive online audience backing her. I had barely collapsed onto my couch, still surrounded by empty furniture boxes and the metallic smell of new screws, when my phone buzzed with a notification that made my stomach drop. "Your sister-in-law just went live." Not from a friend, not from my contacts, from a coworker who had no real reason to message me at all. That alone was a warning. I clicked the link, and there she was, Jane, still wearing last night's makeup, hair disheveled in a way that looked intentionally tragic, face blotchy enough to evoke sympathy from the type of viewers she wanted desperately to impress. She sat in the passenger seat of a police cruiser before transfer, live streaming herself crying while spinning a story that made my blood run cold. "I wasn't drunk," she sniffled. "I wasn't careless. I'm a good mom. This is a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by someone who hates me." Chat comments poured in fast. "Stay strong, Queen." "CPS is overreacting again." "Who would accuse you?" "Cancel the liar who reported you." Another comment. "Name her." Jane hesitated just long enough to make it seem accidental. "My husband's sister," she whispered dramatically. "Willow. She's been jealous of me for years." My jaw locked. She wasn't just lying. She was weaponizing her followers. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Whether real or fake didn't matter. She's always thought I wasn't good enough. She took this chance to get revenge. She wants to take my babies and destroy my family. A few viewers wrote sympathetic emojis. Most turned vicious. "Expose her." "What's her full name?" "Let's get her fired." "Tell us where she works." My chest tightened. I ended the stream before more bile poured out, but the damage was already spreading across social media. My name, even spelled incorrectly, was already circulating. I turned my phone off. I couldn't deal with that now. Not when Hannah was still in the PICU and Dean was asleep in a hospital room with his hand wrapped around the stuffed bear I'd bought him. Not when CPS was the only thing between them and foster care. Not when tomorrow morning might be the day they come home. I drove to the hospital with the kind of exhaustion that numbs every thought except the next task. Inside, Dean was awake, knees hugged to his chest as though protecting himself from the world. "Is it true?" he asked the moment I walked in. "Is Mom saying things online?" I sat beside him. None of what she said matters. CPS sees facts, not followers. But everyone loves her online. They always believe her. That doesn't mean they're right. He sniffed. "I heard nurses talking. Some people think we're making everything up." I breathed slowly, fighting the rage curling through my ribs. "Dean," I said gently, tilting his chin toward me, The truth is on your side. The police saw what happened. The EMT saw. CPS saw. I saw. No live stream can undo that. He stared at me for several seconds, the weight of too many adult-sized fears crushing him. You won't let them take us away, right? Never. He nodded slowly, as though convincing himself I could be trusted. When I tucked the blankets around him, he whispered, I don't want to go back. You won't, I said. But inside, worry lodged itself like a shard of glass. Jane wasn't just dangerous in real life. She had an audience and a megaphone. And by the next morning, her followers would take their outrage offline and straight into my front yard. The morning sun had barely crested the horizon when the noise began, a low, rising hum outside my duplex. At first, I thought it was construction work or maybe a plow clearing the street after last night's frost. Then the voices started, angry, loud, directed at me. I pulled aside the curtain. My breath froze. A cluster of strangers, 10, maybe 12, stood on my lawn holding phones, posters, and ring lights. A few cars idled behind them, hazard lights blinking like warning flares. One woman held a giant cardboard sign painted in red. Stop family destroyers. Another shouted at my window, We know what you did. I blinked, confused, not believing the scene. Then I saw the livestream comments on their screens. Jane's followers. From her 3 a.m. meltdown. Here in real life. A man wearing a beanie cupped his hands around his mouth. Come out and apologize, Willow. A girl with pink hair recorded herself on TikTok. We're outside the home of the woman who lied about child abuse to steal her niece and nephew. Wait until you hear the story. I stepped away from the window, heart hammering. I didn't want them filming me. I didn't want any misunderstanding to escalate. A loud pounding rattled the door. Face US, someone yelled. Another chimed in. Where are the kids? Did you hide them? Then the most chilling line. We should make sure she never works around children again. My hands shook as I dialed the police. This is Nurse Willow Hart, I said. There is a group of strangers outside my home threatening me and interfering with a CPS case. I need immediate assistance. Dispatch responded calmly, but my pulse raced as the pounding continued. I cracked the door, just long enough to speak through the chain lock. You all need to leave, I said, voice steady despite the tremor inside me. You're trespassing. A woman shoved her phone closer to the crack. How much did they pay you to ruin that family? No one paid me, I said. You're lying, someone shouted. Before the mob could escalate further, the distant wail of police sirens cut through the air. Several people scattered instantly, panic unraveling the bravado they'd strutted in with. A few stubborn ones kept filming, narrating as if they were heroes in some misguided documentary. 2 patrol cars pulled up. Officer Jasper stepped out, same officer who had arrested Joshua the night before. His expression hardened when he saw the crowd. Everyone step back, he commanded. Now! Arguments exploded. People insisted they were just documenting injustice, claiming they had the right to protest. But Jasper was unmoved. This is an active CPS investigation, he said. You are interfering with a minor safety case and trespassing on private property. One man protested. We're not hurting anyone. You're about to be escorted off this property, Jasper replied. Or charged. Your choice. That ended it. The group dispersed quickly after that, some muttering, some shaking their heads, all of them live-streaming their retreat like wounded soldiers. When the last of them left, Jasper turned to me. Are you okay? He asked. Yes, I said, though the adrenaline shaking my hand said otherwise. He nodded. I'll file a report and notify CPS. This won't affect your case. I exhaled, relief flooding through me. But this was only a symptom. The real problem was still behind bars, and eventually, she'd get out. And when Jane realized online drama wasn't enough, she attacked in the one place she knew would devastate me most, my job. I had just clocked in for my next shift when my charge nurse pulled me aside with a tight expression. Willow, she said carefully, we need to talk in my office. My stomach dropped. That sentence never meant anything good. Inside her office sat the hospital's risk management officer, clipboard ready, face unreadable. I felt suddenly cold, like my skin had been dunked in ice water. What's going on? I asked. The officer folded her hands. We received a formal complaint about you this morning. My throat tightened. From whom? A patient family member. A pause. Your sister-in-law. Of course. I sat rigid as she continued reading from the complaint. This nurse endangered my children, lied to authorities, fabricated medical emergencies, and manipulated CPS to break up our family. My chest burned. It gets worse, the officer said, sliding another document toward me. She claims you violated HIPAA. I stared at her. That's impossible. I would never. She said you publicly shared her children's health information. My jaw clenched. I didn't post anything. She live-streamed her own arrest. The officer nodded. We suspected the complaint lacked credibility, but regulation requires us to investigate. The walls closed in. If the investigation went the wrong way, I could lose my badge, my license, years of schooling, my entire livelihood. She also claims, the officer continued, that you're trying to kidnap her children and have a personal vendetta against her marriage. I almost laughed, in disbelief, not humor. My only goal is to keep the kids alive and safe. My charge nurse placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. We know, but the hospital must document everything. I forced my breathing to steady. What do you need from me? Every detail, the officer replied. Timeline, actions, witnesses. So I told them everything. The knock at 4:30 a.m. Dean carrying Hannah. Her respiratory distress. Her temperature. The frozen lock. Their parents' absence. The arrests. CPS involvement. The mob outside my house. By the time I finished, both administrators looked stunned. My charge nurse exhaled slowly. She left her children in a storm. Yes. Locked them out on accident. On purpose, I corrected quietly. Why? I swallowed. They were upset she was going out again. They begged her to stay home. Risk management shook her head. Her complaint is fraudulent. We'll close the case. A wave of relief washed over me, so strong it made me dizzy. But then the officer added, however, because this is a high-profile situation online, we'll need to put you on administrative leave until CPS concludes their investigation. The world lurched sideways. Leave. Now. Right when the kids needed stability. I started to protest, but my charge nurse squeezed my arm gently. This protects you, she said softly. Not punishes you. I nodded, though fear gnawed at my chest. If you need anything, she added, call me. I walked out of the office in a daze. Jane wasn't done breaking things. She was going to scorch everything she touched. And her next target wasn't my home or my job, it was my chance at keeping the children. The courtroom was cold in a different way than winter. Sterile, unforgiving, packed tightly with the kind of silence that made every shuffle of paper sound like an explosion. CPS cases are usually quiet affairs, but today felt heavier. Even the judge looked uneasy as she reviewed the files. I sat beside the children's appointed lawyer and Carla Evans. Across the aisle sat Jane, freshly released on bail, with her attorney by her side. Her makeup was flawless, her hair smooth, her tears ready to fall on cue. Joshua wasn't allowed in the room. His charges were still pending. Dean and Hannah waited with a child advocate in another area of the building. Good. They didn't need to see any of this. The judge adjusted her glasses. We are here to determine temporary placement for the minors Dean Hart, age 11, and Hannah Hart, age 6. Jane sniffled loudly, already playing the part. Her attorney stood. Your Honor, my client is eager to regain custody. The events leading to this unfortunate misunderstanding have been grossly exaggerated. Carla shot to her feet. Your Honor, that is not accurate. Evidence shows severe neglect. The children were exposed to freezing temperatures, left unattended, and suffered medical harm. Jane dabbed her eyes, voice trembling. We were gone for only 2 hours. 7, Carla corrected sharply. Jane's attorney tried again. Emotions were high that night. Online slander muddied the facts. The judge held up a hand. The online activity is irrelevant to the facts of the case. Jane flinched. However, the judge added, I have reviewed your client's behavior during this investigation, including live streams that appear to blame everyone except herself. Jane's mask cracked. Your Honor, she's trying to steal my children. The judge turned to me. Miss Hart, You are requesting kinship placement. Yes, Your Honor. CPS has approved your home. Yes. Carla stepped in. Inspector Evans confirms full compliance. Ms. Hart immediately secured appropriate bedding, safety systems, food provisions, and medical accommodations. The judge nodded. And your employment status? I inhaled. Currently on administrative leave, pending completion of this investigation, but not for disciplinary reasons. Carla backed me. Her leave is protective. Your Honor, not punitive. Jane's attorney seized the moment. A nurse on leave? With limited income? How can she care for 2 children long-term? Before I could breathe, Carla responded. Because she already has. She saved their lives before EMS even arrived. The room fell silent. Then the judge asked the hardest question. Ms. Hart, why do you want custody? The truth rose in my throat, raw and unfiltered. Because Dean walked a mile in the freezing dark to save a sister, I said quietly. Because Hannah panics when she can't breathe. Because these children are terrified of going home. Because I'm the only one who didn't abandon them. Even Jane's attorney paused at that. The judge sat back, thinking. The air turned heavy. Finally, I am granting temporary custody to Ms. Willow Hart. My breath left me in a rush. Jane's scream tore through the room. No, you can't do this. Her attorney grabbed her arm, whispering frantically, trying to contain the explosion. But inside me, relief bloomed. Dean and Hannah were safe. For now. But I didn't know that Jane wasn't finished, that she had one final card to play. And it would hit closer than I ever imagined. The first night with the kids home should have been peaceful, warm pajamas, hot cocoa, a gentle bedtime story to soften the trauma still clinging to their small shoulders. Instead, attention hung in the air like static. Dean kept glancing at the windows. Hannah stayed close enough to touch. Even my cat hid under the bed. Trauma doesn't leave quietly. I tried to distract them with a movie. A soft one. Familiar. Something with singing animals. But halfway through, Dean muted the TV. Aunt Willow, he whispered. Yes. Do you think she'll come here? My stomach tightened. No. She's not allowed within 200 feet. But she doesn't follow rules, he said. I couldn't argue that. After I tucked them in, I double-checked every lock in the house. The front door, back door, windows, even the garage entry. I set the alarm system I'd installed 2 days ago, watching the digital panel glow blue in the dark hallway. The storm outside intensified, wind clawing at the siding. At 1:14 a.m., I woke to a sharp crack. Not thunder, not a branch. Glass. Then, the unmistakable sound of beeping. My alarm. Heart punching against my ribs, I grabbed my phone, stumbling down the hallway. The alarm panel blared red. Break-in, living room window. Hannah, stay in your room. I shouted. Dean, lock your door. My voice sounded foreign, frantic. Footsteps, fast, heavy, pounded across the living room floor. A silhouette moved near the shattered glass. Get out! I yelled. Then the figure stepped into the spill of moonlight. Not Jane. A man. Tall. Hood up. Gloves on. He kicked over a lamp. The crash sent Hannah screaming from her bedroom. Stop! I screamed. He didn't. He moved toward Hannah's voice. Adrenaline surged. I grabbed the first object within reach, a cast iron pan left drying on the counter, and charged. The man spun too late. The pan connected with the side of his head in a sickening thud. He collapsed, groaning. I yanked Hannah into my arms, shaking. Dean ran from his room with a baseball bat, eyes wide with terror but brave in a way no 11-year-old should ever have to be. It's okay, I whispered, voice trembling. You're safe. You're safe. Police sirens wailed outside. Officers poured in through the door I'd left open in panic. Flashlights cut across the room, landing on the unconscious intruder. He wasn't a random burglar. He was one of Jane's followers, someone who had commented on her stream earlier, calling me a danger to children. He'd driven 3 hours to rescue the kids. Officers handcuffed him as medics assessed the wound I'd created. Jasper shook his head. You saved them, he said. Again. I held Hannah tighter. As officers swept through the house, gathering evidence, Jasper approached me with something edge of sorrow, edge of anger. Jane didn't send him, he said, but she lit the match, meaning she was legally responsible for the firestorm she started. I felt suddenly exhausted, not physically, but in my soul. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And when CPS and the court learned what happened that night, everything about the case would shift permanently. By the following morning, my living room looked like the aftermath of a storm. Shattered glass taped over with cardboard furniture askew, the faint smell of cold air still clinging to the walls. The children were asleep in my bed, Hannah curled against my side like a frightened kitten, Dean insisting he would guard the doorway until dawn. I let him. He needed to feel useful, safe, in control of something. I didn't sleep. At 8:12 a.m., a firm knock sounded at the door. Not loud, not frantic, official. Purposeful. Carla Evans stood outside, clipboard in hand, coat dusted with frost, her usually controlled expression tinged with something unfamiliar, concern. "I received the report," she said. "May I come in?" I stepped aside. She surveyed the room with practiced eyes. First the boarded window, then the toppled lamp, then the tiny shoe prints on the hallway rug where Hannah had run in fear. Carla exhaled slowly. "Tell me everything." So I did. The alarm. The breaking glass. The man moving toward the children's rooms. Using the pan as a weapon. Dean's bravery. The arrest. The intruder's connection to Jane's livestream. Carla didn't interrupt. She took notes with sharp, decisive strokes. When I finished, she pressed her lips together. "This confirms what we suspected," she said. "The children cannot safely return to their mother." Her tone was clinical, final. But there was more. "Additionally," she continued, "this incident supports an emergency motion for full temporary custody." My heart leapt. "Meaning?" "You will not need weekly home checks. You will not need supervised visits. And the parents will not be permitted contact beyond what the court authorizes." I exhaled, dizzy with relief. Carla stepped closer. "Ms. Hart, last night you protected these children with your own life. That matters. The court will see that." A soft creaking sound interrupted us. We turned. Dean stood in the hallway, blanket draped around his shoulders like a cape. His hair was a tangled mess. His eyes were tired but determined. "Is it over?" he asked. Carla approached him gently. "It's not over yet, but it's getting better." He looked at me. "Are we staying here for a while?" I knelt. "You're staying here as long as you need to. No one is taking you away." Dean's shoulders relaxed in a way I'd never seen before, as if for once his brain accepted that safety could be real. Carla crouched to his level. "Dean, your Anna's doing everything right. And we're going to make sure you and Hannah stay protected." He nodded, though fear lingered at the edges of his expression. Trauma doesn't vanish overnight. It unravels slowly. After he returned to the bedroom, Carla pulled out another form. "This is for the emergency motion," she said. "Sign here, here, and here." My hand trembled slightly as I wrote my name across the lines. It felt like writing the first chapter of a new life, not just for me, but for them too. Before leaving, Carla paused at the door. "You're not alone in this," she said. For the first time in what felt like weeks, I believed her. But just as things began shifting in our favor, one unexpected visitor arrived whose testimony would change the case forever. Later that afternoon, while I was sweeping shards of glass into a dustpan and trying to make the living room feel less like a crime scene, another knock echoed through the house. Not police, not CPS, something different. When I opened the door, Mrs. Langley, my next-door neighbor, stood clutching a thermos in a folder. Her silver hair was pulled into a neat bun, her coat zipped to her chin, and her expression unusually serious. "I heard about last night," she said softly. "May I come in?" I let her inside. She set the thermos, hot cocoa on the counter. "I should have come sooner," she whispered, but I wasn't sure. I didn't know if it was my place. I frowned. "About what?" She took a long, shaky breath, then opened the folder. Inside were printed timestamps, photographs, screenshots, notes, months of them. "My kitchen window faces the wooded path behind your brother's house," she said quietly. "And I've seen the children outside late at night, sometimes locked out, sometimes crying, sometimes shivering without coats." My breath caught. She continued, fingers trembling as she flipped through the pages. "I heard arguments. screaming. Once, I saw the little girl banging on the door for someone to let her in. My stomach twisted violently. "Why didn't you call sooner?" I asked softly, trying not to sound accusatory. Tears welled in her eyes. "Because your brother would come out afterward. He'd yell into the yard about nosy neighbors. He said he'd sue anybody who interfered." Fear, hers, had kept her silent, not apathy. Then she slid one final photograph toward me. Dean and Hannah sitting on their frozen back porch, wrapped in a thin blanket, huddled against the wall. Timestamp 2 months ago. My throat tightened. "Mrs. Langley, this is clear evidence of repeated neglect." She nodded. "I want CPS to have all of it. I want to testify. Those children deserve safety." I put a hand over hers. "Thank you. This will help more than you know." Just then, Dean stepped into the hallway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Hannah followed, clutching her stuffed bear. Mrs. Langley placed a gentle hand over her heart. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, tearing up at the sight of them. Dean frowned shyly. "Do we know you?" "I'm your neighbor," she said warmly. "And I'm going to help make sure you're safe." Hannah stepped forward and hugged her leg without a word. The older woman froze, then slowly lowered a hand to Hannah's back, tears slipping quietly down her cheeks. After she left, I called Carla immediately. She arrived within an hour, collected the evidence, and said words that made my breath tremble. "This is enough to push for full protective custody. Permanently. Permanently." The word hit different. Dean heard it from the hallway. "Does that mean we never have to go back?" I looked at him, the fear, the hope, the fragile trust. "It means," I said gently, "that the court will know the truth." And the truth was powerful. But before the hearing could happen, someone else stepped forward, someone who knew secrets even darker than what the photos revealed. I wasn't expecting another visitor that evening, but the universe wasn't done unraveling the past. At 6:45 p.m., just as I was making grilled cheese for the kids, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "It's Mia. I used to babysit Dean and Hannah. Can I talk to you?" My breath caught. I remembered Mia vaguely, a high school girl who used to come around occasionally when the kids were younger. She always looked nervous around Joshua and Jane. At the time, I thought she was just shy. Now I wasn't so sure. I texted back my address and told her she could come by. When she arrived, she looked older than her 17 years, dark circles under her eyes, fingers twisting the straps of her backpack. She stood in the doorway like she expected someone to shout at her. "You're safe here," I reassured her. That made her break. She folded onto the couch, shoulders shaking, words tumbling out in a rush. "I should have said something sooner. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Dean peeked out from the hallway. When he recognized her, he whispered, "Mia." She flinched. "Hey, buddy." He stepped forward cautiously. "You stopped coming." Her eyes filled with guilt. "I know. I didn't want to. I got scared." Dean's brow furrowed. "Because of my mom and dad?" Mia nodded slowly. Then she told us everything. How Jane would leave the kids for hours without warning. How Joshua would come home smelling like alcohol and shouting at anything that moved. How they laughed when Hannah cried. How they called Dean weak for needing asthma help. How Jane would brag about how followers don't know the real chaos. My hands curled into fists. But then Mia's voice dropped to a whisper. "There was one night, the worst night. Hannah had a fever, like really high. I begged them to take her to a doctor. They said they didn't want a hospital bill. They told me to give her cold wipes and let her sweat it out." Dean closed his eyes, remembering. "She kept calling for Mommy," he murmured. "And Mommy didn't come." Mia covered her face and sobbed. "I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to call 911, but Joshua told me if I said a word, he'd ruin my mom's business." It hit me then, how many people my brother had intimidated into silence. "It's not your fault," I said firmly. "You were a child, too." Mia reached into her backpack and pulled out a small, cracked cell phone. "I saved everything," she said. "Texts, videos, messages. I didn't know who to give them to, but CPS can have them now." Carla arrived within 30 minutes. She sat across from Mia, documenting every detail, every timestamp, every threat, every recorded moment of neglect. "This," Carla said quietly after reviewing one of the videos, "is damning." Mia exhaled shakily. "Will this help them?" Carla nodded. "More than you know." Dean approached her cautiously and hugged her. "Thank you," he whispered. Her tears flowed freely. After she left, Carla turned to me. "This is enough," she said. "The court won't return those children. Not after this." I looked at Dean and Hannah, sitting together under a blanket, watching a cartoon quietly, and felt something settle inside me. Justice was coming. But justice wasn't just about taking the kids away from danger. It was about what came next, and the judge had one more question for me that would change our lives forever. Courtrooms have a particular kind of stillness, one that feels like standing at the edge of a cliff, waiting to see if the ground will hold or collapse beneath you. The final custody hearing was no different. Carla sat beside me, files stacked neatly. Dean held my hand on one side. Hannah sat on my lap, thumb in her mouth, curls brushing my chin. Across the aisle sat Jane, stone-faced, eyes red, hands clenched around tissues she never used. Joshua wasn't present. He was still in county jail awaiting trial. The judge reviewed the new evidence, the neighbors' photos, Mia's recordings, the police report from the break-in. Then she looked at Jane. "Ms. Hart," the judge said calmly, "these materials depict a pattern of severe, ongoing neglect and reckless endangerment. Do you have anything to say before I make a ruling?" Jane's face crumpled. She stood shakily. "Those kids love me," she said. "They're my world. I made mistakes, yes, but I'm their mother." The judge's voice softened but remained firm. "Being a mother means keeping your children safe. You failed to do so." Jane sobbed quietly. Then the judge looked at me. "Ms. Willow Hart, please stand." I rose slowly, heart pounding. "You have shown extraordinary dedication," she said. "You provided immediate medical care. You secured a safe home. You cooperated fully with CPS. You protected these children from further harm." I swallowed hard, unable to speak. "Given the evidence," she continued, "I am granting you full legal and physical custody of Dean and Hannah Hart." Everything inside me shattered. Relief, fear, gratitude, disbelief. But then, "There is one more matter," the judge added. My breath caught. "These children will need stability, therapy, educational support, and long-term planning. Therefore, Ms. Hart, the court asks one question. Do you intend to raise them permanently?" Permanently. The word echoed through my bones. Dean squeezed my hand so tight it almost hurt. Hannah leaned into my neck, whispering, "Mommy." My vision blurred. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, Your Honor. I will raise them." The judge nodded. "Then as of today, they are under your permanent care." "Congratulations, Ms. Hart." A sob escaped me, raw, unfiltered. Carla placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "You did this," she whispered. "You saved them." After the hearing, Jane approached, eyes hollow, lips trembling. For a moment I thought she might lash out again. Instead, she whispered, "Take care of them, please." I nodded, though my heart ached for the brokenness behind her words. When we walked out of the courthouse together, Dean held my hand tighter than ever. Hannah skipped, humming softly. Outside, the winter sun cut through the clouds. "Aunt Willow?" Dean asked. "Yes. Does this mean you're our mom now?" I knelt, gathering both of them into my arms. "It means," I said softly, "that I will never leave you. Ever." Dean buried his face in my shoulder. Hannah giggled and said, "Mommy." The word struck something deep inside me. Not fear, not uncertainty, belonging. But becoming their mother wasn't the end of the story, because soon after, someone from my past reached out with an offer that could change all three of our futures. 3 weeks after the custody hearing, life finally settled into something resembling stability. Mornings were filled with cereal bowls clinking on the counter, Dean's hurried backpack zipping, and Hannah singing off-key songs while trying to put on mismatched socks. My home, once quiet and sparse, now pulsed with warmth and noise. I had never imagined motherhood would find me like this. Sudden, messy, beautiful. But it wasn't easy. Dean struggled with nightmares. He'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat, convinced the lock had frozen again or someone was pounding on the door. I'd sit beside him until he calmed, tracing circles on his back. Hannah had panic attacks whenever she couldn't breathe deeply, flashbacks of being locked out in the cold. She clung to me during storms. Healing wasn't linear, but we were learning together. CPS continued check-ins, each one smoother than the last. Therapists came weekly. Teachers reached out with support. Neighbors dropped off casseroles and secondhand toys. Even the hospital lifted my administrative leave after clearing me of all accusations. Then, one afternoon, as I helped Dean with homework and Hannah napped on the couch, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in years. My father. Not biologically, my stepfather, the one who raised me before passing away when I was in nursing school. His brother, my Uncle Rowan, had stepped into his shoes afterward. I answered cautiously. "Rowan." His warm voice flowed through the speaker. "Willow." I heard everything. My chest tightened. "From who?" "Your aunt saw the hearing in the paper," he said. "She told the family. We're proud of you." My eyes stung unexpectedly. Then he added, "I want you and the kids to come stay at my property for a while. Just until you're safe." "We are safe," I said. "I know," he replied. "But being safe and being supported are two different things." I let the words sink in. He continued, "I have a guest house with 3 bedrooms. The kids would have space. You would have help." It was tempting. So tempting. But running away wasn't the answer. "Thank you," I said softly. "But I think we need to stay here. Build something of our own." He chuckled. "I figured you'd say that. You always were independent. Offer stands." After we hung up, I sat on the couch and watched Hannah sleep, her chest rising steadily, her hair fanned over the pillow like sunlight. Dean looked up from his worksheet. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said softly. "Everything is finally okay." He smiled, a real smile. One I hadn't seen until recently. And it hit me all at once. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were beginning. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I stood by the window and looked out at the quiet street. No crowds. No police cars. No chaos. Just peace. A life we had fought for. A life we had earned. A life we were building together. The mistake, as their parents once called them, had found her purpose. And the children they once abandoned, they had found a mother. If you want, I can now create a full compiled PDF, a YouTube script version, a short film adaptation, or chapter titles. Just tell me what format you need next.